All right, everybody. Today we are joined by a Grammy Award-winning recording engineer, the direct engineer for Alicia Keys, wears probably many other hats in the music industry, has a pretty dynamic role. This is Mincieli, everyone. So, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Obviously, you're on the East Coast. We got hit with a snowstorm, but it's kind of cool because we're post holiday and the industry kind of it was such a crazy year in dealing with how do we put out albums? How do we, generate strategies through COVID? It's been 2 years of that. So it was nice to pause, and today was just a steady reminder of I gotta go get my car out of the snow and like just do the basic things in life that, keep your feet on the ground. So I'm not mad at not going to the studio today.
So we will be jumping into Jungle City Studio and we will be jumping into engineering. But first, let's take it back to your origins, because I know you are a New Yorker born and raised.
Yes.
Do you claim a borough, or is everything yours, or how do you feel about your representation in the city?
Well, here's the deal. I'm from Staten Island, obviously. I went to school with some of the guys from Wu-Tang. So Inspector Deck, Method Man, and Raekwon were all in my age group. I know there's eight or nine original members of Wu-Tang, but I went to school with the guys that were in, my age group were, you know, Raekwon, Method Man, and Inspector Deck. So I love Staten Island. I think it's the best kept secret, but I love Manhattan, obviously. I love the five boroughs. I think they all connect and intertwine with each other, and there's so much culture and different types of music in each borough that claim, the different styles. So it's, you know, I'm a proud five borough.
All five.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about maybe your origins in music, because from my experience talking to people in music, no matter what position they have, producer, artist, playing an instrument, engineering, you'll find that most people either started out in a band with the ambitions to be a performer or an artist. What was your introduction in music? Like what made you love it and what made you want to get in the industry?
Yeah, so I definitely first started off with vinyl and listening. My older sisters love music, so the first thing was like listening to vinyl and music. And then obviously in the 80s there was a big surge in music, and I was young. I was, in 1983, 84, 11 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old. My first love of music generates way back. But when I realized I wanted to play an instrument and dig deeper, was I love the Pointer Sisters. I started to really dive into a lot of their music because they had great session musicians and musicians. No matter what genre of music they made, whether it was gospel or jazz or the 80s synthesizer music, or they touched so many different genres, and I loved their sound, and I started to play bass. They had some session musicians that played a funk slap pluck style of bass that I was fascinated with, and I started to take bass lessons at the age of 12 years old, and I was lefty and I had to go into a music shop and buy a righty bass and
Ooh.
learn righty because there's really no lefty basses. I mean, Paul McCartney's probably one of the only lefty bass players, and it's a lot of trouble to go into a store and you have to you just can't pick a guitar. So I was young enough to say, well, you know what, I'm just gonna learn righty, which was a lot harder because I couldn't, I had to get this hand moving and
Yeah.
but same for me. I tried to be in bands and play in bands, but I was enamored, well, like I loved everything about the industry. I studied all the instruments. I play guitar too. I have a huge collection. And playing guitar and bass and playing in a band or just jamming and taking lessons really opened my eyes up to the industry. And there was a lot of people in my community in New York. It was like a hobby. Everyone was either beatboxing or playing, rapping or playing an instrument. And that's the thing I love about New York. Everyone has a tie into music, right? Like everyone, even if it was a hobby for people, there's some really amazing people that are just musicians that love the art, so that's kind of how I got into the industry too.
Especially around that time too, there were so many talented people in New York that cared about the music but didn't care about the industry. There's so many people
Exactly.
that we'll never hear of before with the talent that is out of this world, but just never, wanted
Yeah.
to pursue the industry because that's where music was happening at that point in life. Let's go back to the early 90s though, because I think did you used to work at like Sony or something like that? What was it?
I started as an intern at Sony, just like doing like an internship for free, and the same thing at Skyline. It was a music studio. So probably, I started going to Skyline. My friend was a session musician, and that's when I realized, that I can be part of the industry. I started following him to sessions, and I realized, wow, look at all these jobs, look at all this community. It was really cool. And I learned the very young age of like 16, 15 years old that I could be part of this. You don't have to just be in a band trying to struggle to make it, that there's so much to learn. And I was fascinated with the aspect of learning every part of the music industry. So I felt like being in the studio is um the the core of all of that, because you're running into producers and writers and engineers and A&R folks and managers and dealing with the artists for on a long-term album project for a year straight. So, you know, um, it was really an interesting way to get into the industry. It was a shortcut for me too, because I went to audio school, but I just realized that like right away that being an intern was the easiest way to like get the real-time experience that
Get
I
right in
needed.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the earliest credits that I could find for you were 96, 97, in Bon Jovi and Mariah Carey sessions.
There
Um,
was some earlier ones, definitely. Just depends what you're looking at. But yeah, definitely.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, what do you remember as like your first official credits on a record?
Yeah, my first original credit was two of them. Was I was part of the session staff when they thanked the session staff on an album, and I worked with like Judy Collins. She did this album. Judy does Bob Dylan, and she listed the staff at the studio. And the same thing with CNC Music Factory. I got
Oh,
listed as like a staffer, like a staffer, that helped with the sessions, because you don't just you move up the ranks, right? You start as an intern, then you start as a runner, then you start as a general assistant, then you move around. You're like, you can answer phones, and you're the assistant day tech. They do this so you learn all the aspects of. It's not just the technical side of things you learn. It's how do you speak and interact with clients, all the protocols that are in place. So it's a lot of different things that you have to learn before you can actually be an assistant engineer and get those credits. So.
so you finally do work your way up to the assistant engineering stuff. Um, was there like a time for you where you really wanted like that main spot and you felt like maybe it was taking a while, or what was your transition from having to sit back to now you have the keys, this is your show?
Yeah, so I started at a studio named Skyline. I was there a while and they were closing down. So in that transition, because they, like for a
And
year, we're
it
deciding,
was
yeah, I'm
pretty amazing
closing. No,
because
I'm
I
not
was at two
closing. You know what I
studios
mean? As a general assistant. And I learned so much at those two studios. Skyline closed, and then I worked my way up to another studio, Axis Studios, in 94 to 96, where like I was moving up to assistant engineer, and I really cut my teeth in all the puffy um bad boy stuff in the early 90s. So
Wow,
from
yeah.
like 94 to 96, Axis was across from Hit Factory, and at that time Diddy was a machine. So all of his
Yeah.
mixers loved the room that we had at Axis Studios. So Basie Bob and Tony Maserati, they had a whole you know, crew of engineers and mixers. And that's when I first met Mary J. Blige doing the My Life album. And like I started to move up to second assistant. So Axis Studios was a studio where I started to really start to move up. It took time back then because a lot of these artists would lock out in a space for a year and you'd keep the same assistant engineer, at Right Track and at Skyline. So I started to try to find ways, and there was a big music community back in the day with a lot of studios that I was able to plan my move and be strategic.
Yeah. So let's fast forward today to Jungle
Mhm.
City. So today, obviously, you have world renowned, state of the art. You have your own uh, studio, and within this studio, of course, you bring in different artists and you work on different projects. Of course, you mentioned like Hit Factory.
Mhm.
There's Baseline. There's
Mhm.
all these other different legendary
Quad, yeah.
studios. Yeah, where when you think of this studio, you can go back to certain sessions. Like you can go back to the Jay-Z sessions making the Black Album.
Hmm.
Like all these different studios have almost like signature moments.
Yeah.
What do you think that Jungle City has built so far? When you think about your studio, what are the sessions that stick out in your mind the most?
Definitely Magna Carta, Holy Grail, to see my studio in the middle of the NBA, like, was it All-Star game or finals during halftime? And there was a 3-minute segment all filmed and recorded at Jungle, with Jay-Z, Rick Rubin, Pharrell, Swiss. That whole album was done from start to finish at Jungle, and a lot of the Beyonce sessions through the years. She was one of the first artists in Jungle when the paint was drying and stuff. So and still till today comes through Jungle. Ariana Grande. We've had so many Depeche Mode being able to come in because I wanted to be a destination studio. Like New York is a hub, so New York and LA are always going to get the artists. But to be a destination type studio and provide a level of service and equipment and gear that allows people like Depeche Mode to come in and camp out for 6 months straight, or this band from Japan called Dreams Come True, that they come in, they work, and they enjoy the experience, or Apple Music camping out. A lot of people don't know that Apple started their streaming service right from the heart of the jungle with
Wow.
Ebro and Zane Lowe for 4 years straight. Unveiled that to like 110 countries. Like
How did I not put that together?
every day you saw Ebro filming, that was in Jungle for 4 years
Whoa.
straight. Like, so to
Yeah.
be able to like be the modern day Motown in a way, like, and bring a lot of that back, the community back together, to try and explain to people that you don't have to just stay in your house making beats, to get out and network and get yourself in the situation of working in a studio, and to bring the old ways into a new hybrid. And that's how I look at Jungle. You'll see a lot of old vintage pieces of gear, and you'll see some of the latest technology. So, and a lot of artists come in to use that stuff.
Which is just where we were headed next when it comes to in today's modern times. Um, so you have the traditional engineer versus almost the technological engineer, which in some senses of the word can be actually two completely different jobs because you
Mhm.
guys can do two, you guys have totally different skill sets. But there's people that meet those things in the middle, like you at Jungle, who have, access to all these different old instruments, old
Mhm.
machines, and you know how you still can work the boards, turn knobs, do all those different
Exactly.
things. But you can also apply that to today's technology with plugins and different things. One of the things that stuck out to me the most was I was watching an interview with you and Alicia, and you were talking about how you guys have your own plugin
Yeah.
for her. And I don't think I've ever heard you really expound on that, but how did that come to be?
It was my idea, honestly. We used, as much as we would use old gear, we're really cutting edge on what is the new softwares we should be using, what are the new digital workstations should we be using. And we were using virtual synths, which are the software versions of a lot of the synths that we use. And we started way back in the day with this plugin called the B3 from Native Instruments. Logic was one of the first ones to have a B3 plugin, and Native Instruments had a B3 plugin. And I said, there's not a lot of artists that make their own sounds. So like why? Like if I was Stevie Wonder, why don't I have a clavinet sound? If I'm Paul McCartney, why don't I have my own signature bass sound? And for Alicia, she it made sense because we wanted a piano that sounded incredible. A lot of the plug-in companies, it's a business for them. So they care about the machine of it. They'll have a, you know, the tech, they work on the tech. This ties into what you were saying. It's very technical on how they hit each hammer, how they hit each note, 8 notes per, there's 8 samples per note with the pedal up and pedal down. So on a piano, so for a plug-in company, they're not worried about the sound. They're worried about how quickly they can get this product out to the world. With us, we cared about the sound of the piano and having it really feel like it was real with the pedal noise. When you lifted your fingers up, you hear the pedal, the release of the keys, like you hear the foot pedal noise, and you could adjust that in our plugin. And we have all these really cool impulse reverb settings that was designed by Ernest Chalakian, who was a guy that designed reverb. But getting back to Native Instruments, it was my idea. I hit up one of the guys at Native Instruments, and I hit up a guy named Thomas Scarby, who is like, let's say he's the equivalent of making mixtapes, right? He's this independent plug-in maker, but he has the most incredible sounds. And he's using this technology of Contact, which is a sampler in Native Instruments, but he's designing his own sounds. So I hired him together with Native Instruments and Alicia. It was this one-time collab, and out of it, Alicia did a deal with Native Instruments, and so did Thomas Scarby, which was incredible because then he, for a long time, did his whole line of products through Native Instruments, and we sold hundreds of thousands of copies of this now. We still get royalties, and we did this in 2008.
Yeah.
It didn't happen overnight. It took 9 months to build the sounds and samples because they had to be control mapped, and each note had to be assigned to a key, and each like sample had to be assigned to a velocity. If I hit the key soft, it's one sample. If I hit it the hardest.
Yeah.
So I also learned a lot about engineering, about noise in the room, about having to eliminate the noise of the tube mics we wanted to use or the tube mic pre's. That was the whole beauty of us making a plugin. We didn't want it to be mechanical like the other plugin companies who had, it would trigger in their notes by MIDI. We did ours with a digital meter by hand, but that was the beauty of it. And still till today, it's the biggest piano plugin on stage and in the studio. And when I hear songs, sometimes I'm like, that sounds like my Ryan Tedder to Louis Capaldi to, that's my piano plugin. I know it.
You actually use it with Alicia?
All the time on stage, in the studio. We're like everyone else, in the pandemic, we are in our bedrooms making tracks, trying to make the best of it. We don't always have our hands on a real piano, and like we're on a tour bus or setting up in a hotel room. We do all, the beauty of technology too, it allows my neighbor who's 10 years old to ask for Ableton for Christmas.
Yeah.
Years ago, with using tape and 100 input desks, there was a big divide. Now it's like everyone could learn together. So we're doing the same thing. We're in our bedrooms, like, making music, you know what I mean? Using the same tools that everyone's using at home.
So I think now that we have all the technology, for me, the music game, I've always compared to sports. To me, it's just like the easiest comparison to make. So today's beat makers are kind of like the best athlete in college, right? And then
Right.
eventually you're going to have to go to the NBA. And the people that are in the NBA know how to do everything. So
Yes.
that you can spot the difference between somebody that doesn't have a strong background in knowing the mechanics of how engineering works versus people that only rely on technology. So I think in a way, I wouldn't say technology hurts the industry and like ease of access hurts it, but
No.
I do think that we need more people to do their due diligence and learn the correct way, because when you can blend both worlds, I think that's what makes the engineer that top artists at least want to work with. Is that accurate, you think?
Yeah, and I can compare it to like say baseball where all of a sudden it gets so technical and mechanical and we're studying analytics and it's like this guy can't play in a day game because he doesn't hit in Chicago Stadium really good. It gets too crazy and you have to forget all that sometimes. Same thing in music. There's such a creative side to what we do that we can get technical to the point where like, oh, this calibration's off 1/10 of a dB and this converter is better and you should work at a higher sample rate because it's about the performance, right? It's about the song. It's about painting the sonic picture and these comparing the gear to like crayons in a crayon box. I might use this compressor because it has this color and sound. I might use this compressor because it's really clean and I'm going for that sound. I might use this mic pre because it distorts and Alicia wants a distorted vocal. So I compare it a lot to where it's like, the experience is key, and that's the same thing, right? As well, coming from college, getting into the big leagues, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, there's a transition. That's why I always encourage people that are in their basements or in school to get out and get in the studio and work in an environment where you're going to see the fast-paced workflows of the artists coming in and out and learn how to interact and do all of those things, and I compare it I always compare our team because I work for Alicia as well and I'm part of a team with Alicia. So Jungle's my side project, but I even explained to a lot of the people on our team, like, hey, we're all a team. We all have roles here, but this is a batting lineup and all of us have to be, doing our jobs and realize when we come in and when to step to the plate and when, so I have the mindset of sports in my everyday life that I make decisions and do things, whether it's we're working with Alicia, whether it's engineering, whether it's studying the latest analytics across the DSPs to trigger out how we trigger in algorithms or what are our partnerships across all the platforms. It all ties together. And I think the analogy of sports and music is so close, right? We study just like, scouting reports in baseball or football or basketball, right? We're studying the same things. Who's releasing on what day? Okay, what are they doing? Like you try to get all of that insight. So I'm a diehard in sports and I had that mentality my whole life. I took into the music industry.
And so with wearing so many different hats within the industry, I know we touched earlier on having that dynamic role where at this point, even in media, okay, so
Mhm.
when I went to school, right, I was traditionally trained in broadcast
Right,
and public relations. But then as you move on, you learn that you have to know how to write and you have to
right,
learn how to edit and you have to learn how to do all these different things. And now all of a sudden, you are multimedia at this point, even though
right.
you had a concentration in one thing. So talk a little bit about all the hats that you wear and what your day-to-day operations look like, having to basically switch between all of those.
Yeah, and I think today we face with the same thing in the music industry. A writer now engineers and a producer engineers and engineer produces. So for me, I'm looking at 2022 like I want to get to the things that I've been wanting to do, which is like produce more because I am I'm Alicia's partner and everything I do day to day evolves around engineering and producing. Forget the credit and what your credit reads. That doesn't matter. We're partners in music. So I find myself doing everything from helping her make a decision on what the next gig is, if we should do the gig and what's the drawbacks, to what's the next producer coming in, what's the vision of the album, what writers do we want to work with, right? Because you have the process of writing the songs, then you have the process of the production. And I could tell you every day, each day is different. She might come in with a Brandy Carlisle and just sit and focus on writing and say, I'm going to produce this later. She might come in with an Emil Haney, who's a producer, and start working on our Moog and come up with a crazy bass line. And that's the start of an epic song or a Jeff Basker. So there's no rules at the end of the day. And I think that that's the key. And every day there's a different there's no 2 days that are the same. So we usually set up the week and we look at like, hey, who's going to be here's I want to work on these 3 songs and I want to work with these 3 writers, and we kind of figure out like, who do we add? Do we bring in a guitar player? Do we bring in a drum programmer? It just depends. And then we schedule it all in, and that's my job. So my job is to coordinate all the travel and work on all the budgeting, all the not so glamorous things, as well as the engineering and the getting the credits and working on the production and painting the sonic picture is great. But I work a lot behind the scenes day to day as well, with like making sure the producers feel like they're treated fairly, making sure their royalties and our manager and they're connecting with management and making sure their deals are locked in with our lawyers and label, and doing all the travel, making sure they're in a nice hotel, and making sure I can sort of be the fair one, the person in the middle that can say, look, put them where they want to be so they're comfortable. Yeah, we can't give you a $10,000 hotel a night, but like, let's find a place that you like and let's figure out a way to, get you in there.
You find that those like those last few things that you mentioned, do you find that that's become harder over the years now that more information is out for artists as far as when it comes to like pay and deals and stuff like that? A lot of artists in the past have felt like they've been treated unfairly. Do you think it's more of a challenge now that artists have access to more information, or is it sort of just like as long as you're an honest and decent person, you can work things out?
Yeah, I think we've always had a structure and we always look at what we've done on all our albums. Like, we look at our deals. What did we pay this producer last album? What do we pay him now? He's was starting out 4 albums ago and now he's got 3 number 1 hits. We have to respect the process. We also do our homework. We go to our label and say, what have you been paying this writer? What have you been paying this producer? And try to get in line and keep everything fair. Like, it gets tough, and you know we really try to balance it all out and make it fair for everyone. I know in certain instances it's like the Wild West. You hear stories all the time of people not getting credits or people not getting you know paid the way they should have, but for in our camp we try to really be fair. So and also that sometimes people are crazy and outlandish with some of their pricing, and they're being advised by someone that doesn't even have the credibility they need to be a manager, and it's like no one's getting paid that, not even your top producers in the industry right now. So it's always a balancing act, but we try to do our best and do our homework, and the labels are great. We all talk to each other and like figure out like, hey, what did this producer get, like what did you know what I mean? So
Yeah. So you've been with Alicia since when? Since eight songs in A minor?
yeah, started in 1998, not full time, but it's like how we started working. 1998, and then it just kept growing month by month, year by year, to the point where like became part of her team.
So what still excites you today about working with the same artist? Because a lot of people or a lot of groups, just things usually don't last this long in music. Relationships usually don't last this long together with people. So what still keeps you excited about working with her? And I mean, besides all the success, obviously, but what's like, is there something that you guys both are striving for that you haven't done yet that you're still looking to accomplish, or what's that thing that keeps you guys going?
Yeah, I think we're hungry as we ever want to. Like, we're constantly striving to just be better, constantly trying to stay ahead of the twists and turns of the technology, and even how we make music now as opposed to 22 years ago when she worked off tape. Songs in A minor was done on 2-inch tape. But yeah, I mean, we always tell each other if we can't help each other grow, then it's time to move on. I do work with other artists too. Like, besides working with Alicia, I have a lot of staff and stuff. I do this whole initiative with Sony Music and Rob Stringer where we're building studios for each of their labels, New York, LA, Nashville, and it's the goal of all of us to keep the music community growing and rolling and get people out of their bedroom. So I work with Sony on a really high level to like build all these studios and rooms out. And I also work with Charles Goldstuck in designing many studios, including one in the Bahamas and one that's up and coming that I can't speak on yet. But I look at it as, you know, Alicia also allows me the freedom to go work with other artists. But when I look at her, like she produces, engineers, she produces, writes, program, plays, sings, and to start an album from a blank piece of paper and make the vision come to life is pretty exciting. And I think that role is very rare in an artist. It's like she's the female version of Prince. There's not many engineer roles like that. I could work every day of my life taking a 2-track and going in someone's house and recording vocals. I get those calls all the time. Or in my studio, there's tons of times where those sessions are for my up and coming engineers. And most of my up and coming engineers, believe it or not, are out there that assisted me through the years. Stu White, Mickey, Stu White's the engineer and mixer for Beyonce. He was my assistant 12 years. Mickey, who works with the artist Her, he won a Grammy. Brendan Morowski, still my assistant, won a Grammy with Taylor Swift, nominated for Ariana Grande. So it's about like also helping each other grow and helping my staff grow. But with Alicia, it's like every day, like on one session, I worked with Brandy Carlisle, like this last album, let's say. I worked with Mike Will, Jason Joshua, Manny Marroquin, Brandy Carlisle, Natalie Hemby, you know, Raphael Sadiq, John Legend, Charlie Puth. They all came in and out to write sessions. So I feel like I'm right in the core of like, at the same time working for one artist, but watching Charlie Puth and like trading drum sounds with him and just hitting them between albums. It's like, you know, at the same time, I'm in the core of connecting and networking and working with all these different artists because that's who she brings in along every album, you know? So to me, I feel like, and every day's a new challenge and every day is a new, like, hey, I want to merge these 3 versions of songs together, you know, that like, and 3 different producers produce and I want to make one version. Like I can't even, it's very high level engineering creatively, and also if you know your Pro Tools and DAWs, it's really high level editing. So it's you know, I'm at the point now where I could pick and choose, but I feel like, you know, and I'm out there in Dubai mixing in front of house, or I'm in a broadcast truck because of the pandemic, you know, like I do a lot of her broadcast stuff and I go in the truck to make sure her music translates to what we see on TV. And I just get to network and meet all of these people like myself and all the different aspects of the industry as well, not just on the recording end of things. And that's the goal, is just to keep learning. Right now I'm trying to buy a broadcast truck and use it and kind of make it our truck that could live in the Hamptons and maybe be in California with us. So it's so much fun. You know, we have a lot of things that are alike. Our work ethic is very similar. The drive to keep growing, the drive to keep like coming up with new ideas and how can we, you know, we did some really incredible partnerships with Amazon and Apple. I want to see her continue to grow. I want to see her sign other artists and get back into that. And I think that, you know, like we should be the modern day of Motown. We should be, you know, like I want to see her. She used to produce a lot more for other artists. I want to see her get back into doing that. She produced some big songs for other artists. So I want to see her get back into collaborating more. And so, you know, we still have work to be done. And I think at the end of the day, we're like family. We've, you know, got through a lot. I've seen a lot of people come and go in our camp. I think I'm like the last man standing. I
Yeah.
watch a lot of people come and go, you know.
Would you consider Alicia like a tech geek when it comes to the tech and music?
She can be, but I think when it gets too much, like that's why she'll still use her MPC because it feels less technical, right? it feels like, like it's almost a instrument. Whereas if you're using Logic Audio Pro Tools and you're moving MIDI notes around, it gets like, when you're the creative, it's hard to like do
Yeah.
both at once. So, she does. She's a really, she understands Pro Tools, she uses it. She, been programming on her MPC since, 1996, so she understands, and she had to, like, playing all these synths and keyboards and understanding how to maneuver in them, back in the day with the MIDI modules and stuff. Virtual synths are a newer thing, so she has to know the old, know the new. She's a player, so yeah.
And with your guys' relationship, it's been like so long. When you are, I remember also in the previous interview you were talking about like your different processes for like building different loops and like creating different samples and stuff like that. When you're creating, are you keeping her in mind for like things, or are you just creating freely?
No, I definitely keep her in mind, and then she gives us a lot of things to do in the off albums. Like, she'll give me 40 songs that are her favorites. Can be everything from Fela Kuti to, Bob Marley to, and we go in and try to match the sonics. Bring out all of our old drum kits, rent drum kits, bring a drum tech in. So a lot of the sonic that we work on, like our drum libraries and stuff, or what we work on in the off albums, if that makes sense, just to
Yeah.
have, our own. Then we buy all these drum machines, but we sample them the way we want to, maybe with some distortion, the tunings that we want. Maybe we go through tape and we're, you know, making we're sampling and doing all this stuff in the off albums, because when you're creating, it's hard to sit there and say, let's tweak a kick drum or tune a kick drum. You want to keep the flow of the session. So we learned to do a lot of the learning in the off albums. Like, she brought in Dave Smith from, he makes all of the keyboards that we use, the Prophets, like he invented MIDI. Go look
Jeez.
up Dave Smith instruments, it's sequential audio, it is what it is, but we fell in love with a lot of his old synths, and then he started remaking them again, and we brought him in for a whole week just to like learn his keyboards and to tweak his presets and to really, I know YouTube is great, but but to have the ability to bring someone like that in who can show us, how to use and maneuver his keyboards and his oscillators, and what do the attacks and releases represent in that keyboard as opposed to some of the other ones, right, that we use. So it's, at the end of the day, I think we're students of the game. We're still just trying to find our way like everyone else in this industry. It's always a battle. It's not easy, right? It's always a twist and turn, like, oh, we need physical CDs, we need vinyl, we need to trigger algorithms off the DSPs, or people aren't going to like, it's always something that we're out there battling. We're just students of the game. So,
All right, so now let's jump into a little game. I'm
okay.
gonna hit you with a song, and you just tell me your memories of either creating, performing, whatever it was.
Okay.
Personally, my favorite song from Alicia is "Stolen Moments," and it's off the unplugged version. Like, that is
Right.
my favorite. What was your involvement in that record? Were you there for the recording live of the unplugged
Mhm.
stuff? I'm assuming you mic'd up her piano and everything.
On the unplugged, that was done in 2005. That song, Stolen Moments, there was a studio version of that that came out way later as a
Yeah.
bonus track in
Yep.
Japan. And I remember just recording the real version of it in the studio, and then she played it live. Unplugged was a huge production done at Brooklyn Academy of Music. We brought all of our big guys in, Manny Marroquin, myself, um, and I don't remember what piano we used at the time, but it's a combination of live mics and a module, because when you have an audience, you deal with a lot of feedback, and the lid has to be closed a lot of the time on the pianos. So it's a combination and a blend of live mics and modules. And these days, the live mics are incredible. We use them a lot more because obviously technology evolved. So
All right. Next song I want to get into is Love Looks Better off Alicia, where I
Mhm.
believe you have a bass playing credit, right?
I do because it was the pandemic and I had to play a couple of notes. So we were in that song took 3 years to come out. It was really done for another record. We held it. We loved it. Ryan Tedder and Alicia started on working on that song at Conway Studios in LA in 2015, and um, we went to Colorado to work on it at his studio in Colorado because he lives in Colorado as well. And then we finished it and did another whole version of it. Took elements of Ryan, took elements of some other drum programmer. I can't think of his name at the time. Like there was a couple of different drum programmers, and then she stripped it all down again. Took elements of Ryan, elements of this guy Jukebox, who is a drum programmer and a producer, and stripped it all down and added like did her own version. Was like there was so much production on the song it almost took away from it, and it was prohibiting her from completing it. So we needed this bass plate, and we were in Joshua Tree, setting up. We set up in Joshua Tree for 6 weeks, and we had this little trailer that was our studio, and there I was having to play bass on this song. And I usually don't try to play like a lot of session stuff because I get nervous. Session musicians, it don't matter how technical you are, it's like you have to have this ability to like play something quick and adapt and be, and I just get too nervous to like repeat something right away. I could play with the best of them, but again, I'm a hop like I play guitar and I'm so glad I do. I play bass and guitar and it helps me with engineering. I'll say to one of the guitar players coming in, "Hey, use my Hofner bass, my 500/1 bass." I bring all my instruments in, but for me to play myself, I guess kind of like, like I don't do session work 24/7, so but I did. I sat there and had to replay some of the bass lines, the live bass lines so she can have her version of the song.
I mean, it must be a feel good moment though to have that on the record.
Yeah, you see some of the video. I think you see me playing bass in there was this video we did for behind the scenes. I think it was on Title, and
I
you see
saw
me
it.
playing bass. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that was for Love Looks Better.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's get into Empire State of Mind, which is one of her biggest records ever. I mean, of course. Also Jay-Z. What are your memories of that record?
I have two. One is I recorded all the vocals. I remember us doing it between New York and LA, and then almost like a month later, getting invited to Yankee Stadium to perform the song during the World Series. I mean, the song exploded, went to number one, and here I was, like I'm a huge music fan of Jay-Z and Alicia, and then here I am, like the biggest Yankee fan in Yankee Stadium, game two of the World Series on the third base foul line, like, getting ready to go out to center field to mix the audio. And if I was at the studio, I was going to show you. I have a game ball from the 2009 World Series signed by Alicia and Jay-Z, and it's actually dirty. If you ever see the game balls, they're like scruffed up.
Yeah, uh-huh.
They're dirty, and
Yeah.
like I still have it in our awards case at the studio. I'll
Wow.
take a photo and show you. But yeah, those are my memories of it. It was pretty amazing. And the minute I heard the song, I realized how big it was going to be, and not just an anthem for New York, but an anthem. And it was a spinoff of Katy Perry, California Girls. She did that because of Alicia did and Jay-Z did Empire State of Mind. So
Yeah.
it's kind of funny because Katy Perry worked at the studio Conway some of the
So
time.
she was at the one that you guys were doing your sessions in
Yeah, yeah,
for the
yeah. And
record.
she was working. Yeah, we kind of were working on our, like,
That's crazy.
yeah.
All right, so let's get into what was your work on Heartbreaker, Mariah Carey?
I assisted that song and I engineered some of the remixes, the Debrat remix and the Junior Vasquez dance remix. Jay-Z came in. That was done in 1999, 99 for the Rainbow album.
Hmm.
We were in Quad Studios in the penthouse at Quad, and I remember how I just when I heard it, I knew how huge and I that song was going to be, and I just remember that Mariah always found the greatest loops and redid them and added production to them, whether it was Fantasy or Heartbreaker or Loverboy or any of those songs. Like, like she always had the niche to find those great hip hop loops and fuse them together.
What about You Don't Know My Name? To
You don't know
me,
my name, yeah.
that song is like one of the cleanest sounding, like it's like a warm feeling when you hear it. I think that's like technically one of the best songs ever created. Just all the different sound that you're getting, it really like puts you through. I can't even explain it. To me, that's like one of the greatest songs ever. But what are your memories of that one?
My memories of that is being at Quad Studios. Kanye produced that
Hmm.
song, and he was just about to like go into really artist mode, right? He had his first album on deck. He broke his jaw. He just got his wires off. Came from LA to New York. He was like, he had his own video that he funded through The Wire, and he was so excited. He was showing all of us it. He was telling us his struggles that the label didn't even want to fund his video. And at the same time, we worked on two songs that were incredible, which was You Don't Know My Name and Unbreakable, right? So You Don't Know My Name was this sample that Kanye had that him and Alicia flipped and played over. And the funny thing is, John Legend's a writer on the track with Alicia and singing background vocals. And then we went to Hit Factory with Manny Marroquin, and we tracked the whole string section on it. So you hear the strings, and there's like a long extended version where the strings play out. But I think it's one of those things that we discuss where it's you're taking these old loops, recreating them and modernizing them, but they still sound vintage and feel vintage. And Kanye's a genius, and he did that whole talking thing in the middle of the song that, like, in today's formula, even back then, would be considered like, oh, that would never get played on the radio. And there we have a lot of moments like that where we push and take that chance, and it did get played on the radio. And yeah, we did an edit, but the people's favorite part about that song is the talking.
Yeah,
They imitate it all the time on all the social channels. You saw who just did it recently, Doja Cat maybe
yeah,
did that whole. But it's like sometimes you think the labels, they get so driven by these formulated ways of making music. And I think the beauty of Alicia is she can put out a song like Fallen as her first single, and it becomes huge. No one believed in that song, but and they all said it would never crack radio. And we have a lot of songs like that where we work hard, but it also defines and twists and turns what can be played. So I think that's important for every artist out there, to for us to break some ground for the next generation or the next wave of people making music.
I feel like she has a lot of different records where she's like talking over it or someone else is
Yeah.
talking, or yeah, it seems kind of be almost like not like a signature thing for her, but it kind of is like really unique to her where she can just go from playing and then maybe an interlude comes and then she's just like talking. That's kind of unique to her.
She loves doing that. Like sometimes even in some of the songs, she talks throughout the song while she's listening to it to study the key and learn it, and she leaves all that talking in, and she'll be like, yeah, and what, and yeah, like she'll leave all those words in there, and I'll go in and mute them, and she's like, no, put my words back, I want to leave them.
Let's get into Partition, Beyonce. That's a pretty
Ah,
huge record, and I believe you have a credit on that as an engineer, right?
I do, and I hopped in for my friend Stu. He was in Japan, and I hopped in and engineered a couple of days on that song, and that was two songs put together, right? It goes from one song into another. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was done at Jungle, and I tracked the vocals.
Wow. So talk to me about what were some of your most challenging moments in your career? Not as far as like, oh, I don't know if this is going to get done or not like that, but technically, like, have you ever ran into like big problems where you're like, oh, like this plugin doesn't work here, and maybe now I'm working on this record for weeks where it would have been done in a way shorter time? Like, what are some of the most technical challenges that you've overcame that you're proud of in a song?
Definitely worked on this Linda Eater session, Broadway musician turned obviously artist, vocalist.
Mm.
But a lot of the Broadway stuff is like really intense, right? It's like gotta go, paying session musicians, gotta go, gotta go. And then we're in a room with a new console or a digital console, and the console crashes and you need 15 minutes to reboot it. And then it's a different, it's a like, for me it was a different level of skill set. I had to be an engineer who assisted. I was the assistant engineer, but I was there really the engineer fixing all the technical issues. So I'm a combination of being a tech, be an engineer, and the assistant trying to be the glue of the room. I remember just minutes feeling like hours while the desk rebooted. It was a digital desk, and it was like literally 18 minutes to reboot, and you have session musicians like looking at you like, damn, you're fucking me up because I only got 3 hours. I'm supposed to be at another studio. So definitely intense times like that. I remember silly stuff happening where like the elevator not working at Quad, and we couldn't get an artist up to the penthouse, and for like 4 hours we're all like, come on, this is crazy. And then at my studio the same artist came in, 30 years later, 20 years later, and we have a brand new building, brand new elevators, and the elevator went down. I'm like, God,
Oh, it's
some
this
shit
guy.
never changes. But yeah, we have things that happen. The good thing is I always have like certain pieces of gear. I have duplicates, right? I have a backup. If a room could, God forbid, goes down, there's three other rooms at Jungle that we can, make work. You know what I mean? So, I've been fortunate. Definitely had, we've all like, have had the issue of, oh my God, a file is missing out of our Pro Tools. And you hope that like, you're smart enough to say, okay, I didn't delete them off the internal hard drive of the computer I was using. Or I think we've all run into little issues like that. But I've been pretty fortunate, with things like that.
Do you think at any point you've ever had, this is going to sound crazy, but too much ambition? And what I mean by that is, have you ever had a sound like in your head that you couldn't actually replicate making? Have you ever run into anything like that at this point in your career?
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard. Like you try to research and figure out how did sometimes Alicia hears a sound of an old record, and it's like, well, I have to go and research the sound, and if I can't get the keyboard I have to figure out another way to come close. And there's many times where I can't hone in, and there's one guy that's incredible with it. He's an incredible engineer. His name is Ken Lewis. And like a lot of times, like if I want a loop really replicated, I'll send it to him. You know what I mean? And he's a genius at it. And that's what he spends the majority of his day. He's an incredible musician, like could make a loop you wouldn't be able to A/B and tell the difference.
Oh,
And I think, like and he plays all the instruments. He plays like guitar and like, so he's amazing, and I'm still striving to get to that level. But it's a matter of he could do it 10 times as quick as the rest of us. So he's one of the best in the business. So definitely every day I'm trying to create some sound, and I come close a lot, but and for the nerds that like myself, that I'll say I'll come close, and some people are like it's the same, like they don't even hear
yeah,
but
I can't
to
hear the
me, like I
difference.
can pick it apart. So
All right, so now let's get into your hoodie and let's get into some
okay,
sports. So
yeah.
obviously you're a giant Yankee fan. You already told us about that with the
Hmm.
Empire State of Mind recordings, but you're an overall New York sports fan in general,
I am. I
which means you suffered through some rough times, which means you've got to live out some really good moments in the 90s. But
Yep.
as far as sports go, what are your favorite sports?
Baseball's first. I love hockey. I love basketball. I love football. I play fantasy football. And I play fantasy baseball and hockey. But I think, like I'm just a diehard. I have season tickets. Um, for the Yankees, I get legend seats almost every year. And then I'm always at Knick games and hockey games, and it's a little harder the last 2 years with the pandemic. A couple of games I went to get got postponed. Like it's tough. Like you sitting with your tickets like in StubHub, like am I gonna get reimbursed? Like
Yeah.
what's the average sports, you know, average sports fans nightmare right now with, like getting seats and stuff. But yeah, I was so excited like when they took sports away from us during the pandemic,
It was rough.
you really realize how much you love it and you missed it and how it
Yeah.
gets you from point A to point B of your life, just like music, right? So when basketball came back and then, football kind of started on time, but I was excited. Alicia got to do the opening night for at the NFL, and it was
Yeah.
exciting to go to Kansas City and actually do that. So it's always nice to get to mix both of them because I understand it, and I'm like, look at this. This is crazy. Like I'm standing in Arrowhead Field or I'm at Yankee Stadium. Like so.
So as a true New Yorker, tell me Knicks versus Nets.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on the possibility of being a fan of both teams? How do you
I
feel about that?
I kind of my love started to grow the last 3 years on the Nets. And I like Tom Thibodeau a lot, right? Like I feel like finally the Knicks have a coach that made a difference, right?
Mhm.
Like I feel like there's such diehards going to the Madison Square Garden games, but it's too many losing seasons. It's too much of a struggle. And I kind of feel like the Yankees are a little bit kind of where the Knicks are right now, right? We didn't win a series since 2009 and kind of like we're just kind of like treading water, but I love where both of them are this year. I love watching both of them. I love the Knicks have a lot of great young players, that are in their lineup. And I love the big three for the Nets. It was really exciting to see them play the other night in Indiana, right? Like to watch how powerful they can be. I hope they can figure out the Kyrie situation. And I think there's such a culture having the Nets play in Brooklyn. It's so exciting. There's an energy there. And it's made a lot of fans, like New Yorkers really open up to the team, so
So do you think New York is changing in that aspect? Because I I would say maybe around the time when the Nets first became Brooklyn, there was like a little divide where you either have to be a Knick fan or you have to be a Net fan. They weren't really receptive to the
right.
Nets yet because they were fresh from Jersey. Do you think we're going to see a world in the future where just all the New Yorkers just support both teams, or do you think there's still going to be that strong Knick fan base? Do you think it'll always be a Knick city?
I think no, I can't say that. Like I know it's a strong Knicks city, but I think a lot of the Knicks fans unfortunately moved over. I see them at the Nets games
Yeah.
like I think like they kind of like both, right? I think it became more of a hybrid now where if definitely you're a Knicks fan, you're a Knicks fan. You're like Spike Lee. You can't see
Yeah.
anything else but orange and blue, right? Like, and then there's a lot of people that the Kevin Durant signing was huge. Like, Kyrie Irving and even Harden, all of the, like people love to go out and see those players play
Yeah.
for the love of the game. You can draw seats just by having those guys on the court, and I think through the pandemic, I think the last 2 years, you see a lot of people liking both. And I think because they took sports away from us and because you're in your house, like not able to do much, you're watching both, right? So
I also feel like it's a little bit of a generational thing too. Like I feel like the older generation that have been with the Knicks forever are always going to stay there, but there's a lot of young people moving into New York, and New York now looks way different than it looked before. So
definitely,
I think you're getting and Brooklyn looks completely different than it looked before. So I think,
definitely.
yeah, you're definitely finding more people that are more open to the idea of supporting both teams, which in my mind is crazy, but sports are sports and everyone can do what they want. Um,
I'm a diehard Yankee fan, but I can't lie. When the Mets were in the World Series, I kind of was like, because I'm such a New
whoa.
Yorker and I'm rooted. Like, hey, I love everything about New York, and I want, like, if someone's in the World Series or the Super Bowl, man, how could I go against them? They're in New York is being, like, on national TV to the world, winning a World Series or a Super Bowl. How could you not, like, root?
You guys feel those ties to the Giants and the Jets? Because I don't. Do either of them even play in New York? The Jets play out in Jersey, right?
Yeah, but Jersey and New York are so close, right?
Yeah,
Like, they play in well, it's not Rutherford anymore. What is it? I forget. It's the new MetLife Stadium.
yeah.
They both play in the same venue. Um, and I think that the Jet fans are the Jet fans, the Giant fans are the Giant fans. I don't think there's a lot of, like, hey, I like both teams. It's like
Yeah,
the Mets and the Yankees. I've never met kind of a person that likes teams.
I was gonna say I will never like the Mets. I will never support the Mets.
So,
But
like, it's like that.
do you think New York needs a football stadium? Like, do you think there needs to be one in the city?
If they found the right location, I think that would be epic. I think that moving one of those teams out of MetLife Stadium, kind of like what when the Nets moved out of, you know, uh the Nets were playing between Jersey and Brooklyn for a few years, right? And then now they're just permanently in Brooklyn, right? So I think that that can be really explosive. I'm trying to think, weren't they supposed to at one point do one on the West Side Highway? But I think they made the High Line and all that stuff now.
Yeah,
At one point, they were really trying to. I think that could be epic
I think Brooklyn Jets actually has like a nice ring to it.
because I feel like the Jets, like MetLife Stadium is Giant Stadium. Like, it's
Yeah,
not Jet Stadium.
yeah, it's not. I think they're the ones that need their own identity.
But when you look at the Staples Center and how who plays
The
there, the Lakers,
crypto.com center now.
yeah, the Crypto.com Center, the Lakers play there, the Clippers play there, the hockey team, the LA Kings play there.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how they switch between all of like how do those two basketball teams play in the same arena? It's interesting. It's a
Plus,
good business move on their part, I gotta say.
plus, I think the Sparks play there too in the WNBA. So
I
I
think
think
you're right. Yep.
that
There's
even
like four or
added,
five teams that play there. I can't
yeah,
remember who else. Yeah.
it adds like another weird dynamic where they always have to change everything.
Yeah, wood floors to hockey to wood floor to and who's away and who's home, all of that.
Yeah.
Do they ever play each other? I forget. Do the Clippers ever play?
I think when the Clippers play the Lakers, I think they say they keep the Lakers stuff up. I'd have to double check that to make sure though, because I remember there was a time when Doc Rivers was upset about that when he was
Right.
coaching the Clippers. He said that they would like leave all the Lakers stuff up, and
Wasn't there talk of the Clippers too, like possibly moving?
yeah, Steve. I think Steve Ballmer wanted to put them in Seattle because they lost the Sonics, so they wanted to be like the Seattle Clippers. But I guess the move never
Right.
went through because I don't know why. But oh man, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so we were gonna talk Yankees.
Hmm.
So what do you think we need to do right now to get ourselves back to the good old glory days of consistent winning?
I think first off, like, analytics drive me crazy because we're not playing a game anymore on style and strategy. We're just studying these numbers, which we can be a hybrid and look at the numbers, but at the same time, it could be a coincidence why a player didn't hit a certain pitcher. And the only way that player is going to ever be able to learn to hit that pitcher if they keep facing them. So I think for the Yankees, it's small ball again. It's getting on base, it's walks, it's bunts, stealing, right? Playing good defense, and then that's your foundation. And then the home runs with the Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge. For me, I want to see the Yankees also be less injury prone.
Yeah.
Haven't seen Aaron Hicks in the lineup for 3 years now, right? What is it going to be like when he comes back? I feel like when you miss 2 or 3 years, the game changes. It's quicker.
We're
It's a
different
different
now.
style. The pitching is different. So it's going to be interesting. I want to see how they call the strike zone this year. I want to see what they do with the whole, grip and the ball situation. But the analytics drive me crazy. And I think it was case in point with the Tampa Bay game. when he took Snell out, right, and he was dominating the Dodgers, and just because analytics said he had to come out of the game
Yeah.
face to face, this pitcher is not proper because he was throwing the game of his life, and those numbers don't mean anything,
Yeah,
right?
I
Like
know.
at that point. So I want to see the Yankees become more of a hybrid. I think Aaron Boone needs to sometimes, like, some of his decision making I question, but I think we're a starter away, and I feel like DJ LeMahieu got hurt last year because of Gleyber his inability to play shortstop.
Yeah.
So LeMahieu was had a lingering injury, went to third base, and then really hurt himself. So I feel like, a lot of these players the Yankees are investing time in. It's too long. Gleyber Torres, Gary Sanchez, um,
Okay.
Clint Frazier, goodbye, dude. I'm glad you're gone. All
Yeah.
you know, like there's guys in the minor leagues that the Yankees seem to take too long. I look at all these up and coming players, these rookies on the Florida Marlins and even the Tampa Bay team. They have that young, is it shortstop and outfielder that they come in and immediately make an impact. And here we are nurturing people
Yeah.
like way too long since they're 15 years old. Like Gary Sanchez is going to be 30 years old soon. When is he going to and it's fundamentals. It goes back
Yeah.
to what I was saying on the fundamentals of blocking a pitch properly, turning your glove the right way. You know what I mean? Like, look, I was going to show you. I got my new glove from Nakona. It
Nice.
has my name on it. I have two of them. This is an infield one and an outfield one. I have this one. I've been designing all my gloves for the next year. And
Oh,
then I have
it's stitched in there too.
yeah, and I have a Rawlings one I just got. It's green. It's mint green.
Uh-huh.
And I play. I love to throw and play and me and my nephew ordered a few gloves and stuff. But I'm a diehard. Like I can't wait for the season to start and spring training and did you hear about David Cohn being on
Yeah.
ESPN? That's going to be interesting because he's one of those guys that just rattles off analytics like Rain Man. Like a lot of fans don't want to hear that on TV. It's too
Yeah.
much. Like let us watch the game without like his WAR ratio or
Yeah.
his hits against day versus night in Florida Marlins Stadium with the catwalk. Like dude, like you're rattling stuff off that's like nobody wants to hear. So it's going to be interesting to see his color commentary. And I like the K Rod, Michael K, Rodriguez. They're gonna do one of those like shows like Boomer, like Eli
Yeah.
and Peyton. So it's gonna be interesting. I'm excited, and I hope the Yankees can get back to fundamentals, like throwing the ball in, knowing where the cutoff man is, like hustling the first base. Like, come on, that's what a lot of these teams that don't have talent are getting. The worth ethic is really there. So I think the Yankees have to get back to small ball.
I think there's a lot of players we need to get rid of, honestly.
I mean, me too. Like seriously,
I've already given up on Gary.
me too. I given up on him 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like when he started like squatting with one knee, or he doesn't. He's lazy. He doesn't turn the.
Yeah.
And you hear the announcers clown him, and it's like I'm trying to watch a game, and all they do is like, Gary, that's not the way. Like half the game is about Gary Sanchez
Yeah.
every game.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I want to see how Cole bounces back this year, and I guess Severino will have him right. He'll be a healthy starter from the start, right?
Yeah, we need more though.
We do. We definitely. Well, with the lockout, I think we were gonna. I predict us getting a shortstop and another starter.
Earlier I was looking at the odds on FanDuel because I'm a big sports betting person. I bet at least 3 times a day. And so I was looking at the odds for a Yankee World Series.
What does
Well,
it say?
so I believe, let me double check. It actually wasn't bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, which was surprising because despite our inconsistency, um, the books still love to put us as heavy favorites, and they've done it for years. Right now, We are the sixth favorite team to win the
That's
World
awesome.
Series with plus 1,200 odds.
That's good. And then
So
if we get a player or two, I'm sure that'll change, right?
yeah, so right now the Dodgers are the favorite to win by a lot. But
But they
then
lost players, right? They lost Scherzer. They lost. I don't know about that. They lost a lot of players, and a few
but
of their players are getting older too.
I thought they brought in some players though. I could have sworn they might have brought in
They signed a pitcher, right?
they also got Corey Seager, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
So I guess they did get a few pieces that would make them good, but I guess their consistency is enough for
Right.
Vegas to win a
But where
game.
does Tampa rank?
Tampa, I don't even think they were in there.
Because
Because
every year they scratch and claw their way. You know
yeah,
them in Houston too.
so Tampa is ninth.
What about the Mets with all their signings?
The Mets are actually they have better odds than us.
I figured because
So
of
they're
Scherzer and their management and like
yeah, so they're actually fourth favorites to win the World Series, which I don't think will happen anyway. And then the worst team in the league is according to the books would be the Baltimore Orioles, who I was at their game last year at Yankee Stadium when we played them in the first game of the series where they blew our lids off, and it was like we had two hits and it was like 11-1 or something like that. And like I think Glaber was the only person to get a hit and it was a home run. And that was the debut for that was the home game debut for Gallo, I think.
and Gallo and the first baseman. You think we'll sign him, Rizzo?
I don't know. I personally want to see what's going to happen with Freddie Freeman. I know it's a long shot, but
And what
uh,
about Luke Voigt? Like he'll probably
I don't even know.
he is he I forget if he's a free agent or he has one more year. I forget.
Oh, yeah, but like all the sites right now are saying that the Yankees are doing everything they possibly can to try to get Freddie Freeman. If we could get Freddie Freeman, I'd much rather have him. Um, Especially coming off of a championship. Plus, I think he's the better player. But
Right.
again, there's 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 this weird world that we live in right now in sports, music, with everything,
Yep.
where it's just analytics are just trying to overpower everything, and it's
Yeah,
like
it's true.
it doesn't work. It
And then the managers have no say. It's like the front office, the GMs are really running the team. It's been the style these days. It's going to be interesting to see Buck Showalter coach the Mets, because I feel like he's going to want to control the team. He's not going to want to like have to listen to the front office, you know. And I feel like Aaron Boone's the opposite. Brian Cashman's really running the team. When you see the lineups, when you see it's Brian Cashman who's really making those calls. So and obviously the Steinbrenners, but I think that that's why Aaron sits in that position because he just does what they want, right? Like so.
That's another tough thing too, is that um all of these franchises are building these giant analytic teams, and these analytic people are starting to get a lot of power. So they're starting to be able to override a lot of decisions. That's why when you see, like, I'm also a big Baltimore Ravens fan, and that's when you see like John Harbaugh going for things on fourth down with 1 yard to go, or he's
Or
going for
2 point
extra points or
conversions.
2 point
Yeah.
conversions, and it's like we know we shouldn't be doing these things, but the analytic guys are like, hey,
We
well,
lost 2 games. Like I follow Baltimore. I had Jackson and I have Hollywood Brown on my fantasy team. And I felt like they really lost 2 games. Like, and now they got to win this week or they're out, right? Like, I
yeah,
think, or they might be out already or they have to win this week. But
I don't think we'll
it's
get
like,
it.
like those 2 games were pivotal in like,
And ultimately, it's because of analytics, where we felt that because we've done this before on this day with this
yeah.
temperature 2 times in a row, 30% success rate or something like that. It just,
But the quarterback was Hunley. It wasn't even Jackson. It
yeah,
was like Hunley, like,
yeah.
like. come on, kick the field goal, kick the extra point and go into to overtime,
Yeah,
like
it's not
it's
like we don't
okay.
have the best kicker ever, but whatever. That's another
Yeah.
conversation. So ultimately, where do you think the perfect relationship would be for music and sports? Like, do you think that there's like some kind of weird way where you could like potentially do something big with the Yankees, or not performance wise, but maybe like creating tracks or creating different chants or just doing different things like that? Maybe
I think
even
more and more
apps or plugins.
I think more and more the worlds collide with the music, and even down to pregame performances, right? You see so many artists at the games, and I think there needs, and look at football, how they integrated a lot of our favorite artists into, right, like the Super Bowl halftime show. We've done a lot with the NFL through the years. Pregame parties, postgame parties. I think baseball can adapt and do some of those cool things that the NFL is doing right now with music. Even the NBA, right? They took one of our songs and they cut it in multiple arenas, and they have fan videos of Alicia's song called Memories. It's I think baseball needs to catch up a little bit to basketball and football. And I think there's so much to be done where all the worlds could collide, culturally it makes a huge impact when the sports world and the music world could get together, and it's and to do good work, whether it's social justice, whether it's promoting the next generation of kids that love sports and music. These are the things. I box every day. I go to Gleason's gym and I watch kids that count their pennies to pay for their membership, but that's what keeps them off the street because um there's such a love of the sport of boxing, and I think with music and sports, it's really powerful to have a skill to learn something because most of the kids now are on their TVs or apps or iPads just playing games all day. And it became too one sided. And I think it's up to us in the industry of music and sports to get kids back out in the streets playing. And especially with the pandemic, now more than ever, kids didn't go out and play. Our parks in New York were closed down. I mean, our mayor chained up the basketball hoops in my local neighborhood, and that to me prohibits sports is such a way of life for the average individual, not just professionals, and it's important for health, for mental health, for, practicing a skill to, and I think that the music industry and sports world need to keep building and keep trying to partner, especially in developing the next generation, and I think people like Jay-Z and Rock Nation, where they help make the worlds collide in a good way, is really powerful. Jay Z has a whole sports company. That wasn't an easy feat,
Yeah,
like you have to go through a lot to become an agency, to hire the right people. There's all these rules, that. Like you can't
and
just
it's a
say, "Hey,
huge risk
I'm
because
just gonna get into the sport." It's like a huge,
you could spend a lot of money and then not get approved, and then all that is down the drain, and you
and
get
there's a lot of really
maybe
hard
nothing.
rules
Yeah,
being an agent and being an agency. Like I think he owned part of the he owns or owned part of the where the
Nets.
Brooklyn Nets play, the Barclays Center. He was
Mm.
instrumental in getting that arena back to Brooklyn, and I think there was all rules with that. Like you can't be an agent and own a piece of a, so more props to him, and to look at his sports agency and see they're signing tennis players and women in the NBA and soccer players around the world. It's not just baseball or football or, basketball. It's like they're growing, and it's nice. That's our management is Rock Nation. And it's nice to go in their office and see all the worlds collide. You don't know who you're going to run into. And it's amazing how close both worlds are, right? So I think more has to be done. I think it could be real powerful, lots of great after school programs. And, we have an organization called She is the Music, where we work in the helping and develop the next generation of females, all that kind of work. And what like NBA programs they're doing in the NFL, where they, are putting in the work for the next generation. They're out in the streets, they're out in the parks, they're investing money, and that's the beauty. I remember last when Alicia did that NFL thing last year, she said, I would only do it if you guys did X, Y, and Z. And you showed me, you're investing back into the community with social justice, back into the community with camps and programs for underprivileged areas, and that's the impact that as an artist in music you can have, so.
One of the biggest takeaways I have in these conversation is a theme of unlocking a blueprint, where I believe I'm talking to people that are experts at the very top of their game. So in your opinion, to all the young engineers, people that are aspiring to be in the position that you are in right now, what would you say is the way to unlock the blueprint and follow these steps so that maybe they can one day get to the level that you're at? What do you
I
think
just
it
think
takes?
I think it takes just being a student of the game. Don't there's no rules at the end of the day. Everyone that is in my position in the music industry followed a different path. So, I also believe in strategizing and making sure you're progressing and evaluating yourself, and making sure you're getting in the rooms with the people you need to get in. There's so much stuff online where I learn so much these days on YouTube videos and tutorials and manuals. Like if we're stuck home in the pandemic, I'm reading this manual and watching how to use a piece of gear online. So I think that learn as much as you can about the industry, learn all the roles, the positions, it all ties into what you do. And the beauty of it these days, like I mentioned earlier, engineers produce now, producers engineer, writers, they write lyrics, musicians write lyrics and chords and melodies, and it's a world that's all intertwining with each other, where years ago it would be very like, okay, I'm an engineer, that's all I do. Hey, I'm a writer, that's all I do. All the worlds are colliding in a really good way, and technology is allowing us to. It's not separating us, it's allowing all of us to work together. I'm using the same piece of gear as my neighbor who just is learning Ableton, and I'm going to go and learn something that I didn't know from a 12-year-old. And I think that's the beauty of it, is just to keep learning, learn the old ways of doing things, learn the new ways of doing things, study all the fundamentals, but it's art at the end of the day. And yeah, we get technical and we have to learn the technical aspects of how a piece of gear works or is put together. But at the same time, use your ears and learn how to use that piece of gear in a way where it's art and it's the creative side of how you develop your style. To me, the pivotal thing for me was learning what type of engineer did I want to be. And I held out until I found the right moment. I found the right moment to be able to jump to work with Alicia, and I found the type of engineer I wanted to be was the type of producer and artist Alicia wanted to be. And I waited for that moment. I could have worked with Bon Jovi, I could have worked with a lot of people, Mariah, but I waited to find I wanted to change the sonic of albums, and I felt like when I worked with Alicia, it was the perfect match. When I found her and was able to collaborate with her through the years, it was the perfect match because she wants to make the perfect art and the sonic. She wants to change the sonic and understands how the production weighs in on the songs, and what it does to the average listener when they're hearing stuff on the radio. So, man, just keep grinding it out, You have to love what you do, and it's not glamorous sometimes. I always tell people this industry is not glamorous. There's so much unglamorous things about it, but it's equally is rewarding, and it's like anything else, whether it's repetitive stuff every day that we do, whether we're doing sports or whether we're doing music or any other job, is like you have to perfect the craft, and just keep studying, just keep being a student.
I'd say I cannot thank you enough for this conversation. This is probably my favorite interview that I've ever done.
Thanks, I
Uh,
appreciate it.
yeah, just because we're learning so much different information, but to see that somebody this high level is um, still such a student, still trying to
Mhm.
stay ahead of technology, still putting in the best effort to create the best music, still doing all these different things and understanding that the industry's changing and changing along with it. But still keeping those classical skills. I think that's part of what makes you really successful. Jungle makes you really successful. I don't think you need me to tell you that you're successful, but you're an extremely successful person. You're inspirational to a lot of different people. I think one thing that people in your spot don't really understand necessarily is that as the industry continues to change, right, artists are starting to learn more about their deals. Artists are starting to learn more about how the industry works, but so are fans. And fans are starting to look up these different engineers and look
Mhm.
up their careers and see all the work that they've worked in and are really respecting engineers um, maybe on the same level as artists and producers these days because there's more people that are growing up wanting to be what you are now. So I think that to be able to talk to one of the top engineers in the world has been a nice privilege for me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate, you reaching out and appreciate you taking the time to interview me. Like I love sports and I know that's how we met. We were just randomly commenting on a I think it was a Russell Westbrook game or something.
Yeah, yeah,
We were like,
yeah.
and that's the beauty of it is continuing to network and continuing to try to keep pushing forward, So I appreciate it. Come through one day to Jungle. I'll give you a tour. And
I definitely want to do that.
yeah, hit me up anytime. I'll totally give you a quick little tour, and you'll be you'll it'll put everything in perspective. You'll get to really see a lot of what we're talking about. So,
Do you have any last thoughts for anyone out there before we get out of here?
man, there's no rules at the end of the day. Everyone is on. With technology today, no matter what field you're in, the field like just if you can work and you can like for me, I always was respected because I put in the worth ethic. And I use Alex Rodriguez as an example of how hard he not only had the talent, but he had to outwork a lot of the players in his situation. And I would just say, keep dreaming, keep hustling hard, and you'll always gain that respect. Just keep outwork. There's no competition. There really is no competition if you can really put the work in.